If you're hearing this story for the first time, stop, because what you're about to hear won't make any sense unless you've already watched part 1. In the first part, two best friends were kidnapped after stopping at what looked like a routine police checkpoint. They escaped from a moving van, ran into a remote forest, and spent nearly an hour being hunted by armed kidnappers. Then something happened, something neither of them nor the police could ever explain. The kidnappers suddenly stopped chasing them. Not because they lost them, but because they refused to take another step into the forest. Inside that forest, Ryan and Noah found an abandoned campground, a missing hiker's journal, an old fire watch tower, and a mysterious park ranger who somehow knew exactly where they had come from. His first words were, "You crossed the old boundary, didn't you?" If you haven't watched part 1 yet, I highly recommend you pause this video now and watch it first. Without it, you'll miss the clues, the hidden details, and the reason everything you're about to hear becomes even more terrifying, because from this point forward, the story doesn't get safer, it gets much, much worse. This is Tales of the Dark. The old ranger never took his eyes off us. "You crossed the old boundary, didn't you?" Neither Noah nor I answered immediately. We were too busy wondering one thing. How had he reached the top of the tower without making a sound? The staircase was rusted. Every step screamed beneath our weight. Yet somehow, this old man had appeared behind us, as if he'd been standing there all along. He wasn't holding any equipment. No radio, no backpack, no flashlight, just an old wooden walking stick polished smooth by decades of use. His faded green ranger uniform looked older than both of us combined. The name stitched above his pocket had almost completely worn away. Only 3 letters remained, H.A.R. Whether that was his first name, his last name, or something else, I never found out. He slowly walked toward the broken window overlooking the endless forest without turning around. He asked another question, "The men chasing you, how many were there?" I swallowed. 7. He closed his eyes. "They're still standing there, aren't they?" Noah stepped closer to the window. "You knew." The ranger gave the smallest nod. "They always stop there." My stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" "Always." The ranger never answered immediately. He kept staring through the broken window, toward the endless forest stretching beyond the tower. For nearly a minute, no one spoke. The only sound was the wind pushing against the old wooden walls. Finally, he sighed. "They're still standing there, aren't they?" Noah slowly nodded. "They never crossed the sign." The old ranger looked down at the floor. "They never do." A chill ran through my body. "What do you mean, they never do?" He looked at us for the first time. His eyes were tired, not frightened, not surprised, just exhausted, like he'd been forced to repeat the same conversation for years. "Sit down, if we're lucky. You still have a little time." Neither of us wanted to sit. Every instinct told me to leave that tower immediately. But leave and go where? We had no food, no map, no signal, no idea where we were, and somewhere behind us, 7 armed kidnappers were still waiting. We sat. The ranger walked to a dusty metal cabinet in the corner. He opened it. Inside were dozens of old files, weather reports, topographic maps, emergency logs. Some were so old the paper crumbled when he touched them. He pulled out a thick brown folder. The words on the cover had almost faded away. Only one line remained readable. Incident reports. He placed it on the table. I stopped counting after 43. Noah frowned. 43 what? The ranger opened the folder. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, families, campers, search and rescue teams, park employees, children. Every photograph had a date written on the back. Some were nearly 30 years old. Others were only a few months old. Every single one had one thing in common. At least one person in each photograph had disappeared. Officially, they were listed as missing. Unofficially, the ranger believed something very different. "You work here alone?" I asked. He smiled faintly. "I used to. There were 12 of us, 12 rangers. Now," he looked around the empty tower, "it's just me." Noah stared at him. "What happened to the others?" The ranger didn't answer. Instead, He slid another photograph across the table. It showed 6 park rangers standing beside this very tower, all smiling. One face had been crossed out with black ink, then another, then another. Only the old ranger remained untouched. He quietly said they weren't killed, they weren't attacked, they simply went looking. I felt my stomach tighten. Went looking for what? For people, the missing hikers, the campers, the children. The kidnappers. He looked directly at us, anyone who crossed the old boundary. And Noah suddenly stood. This is insane, we are calling the police. He pulled his phone from his pocket, still no signal, not even an emergency connection. The ranger wasn't surprised. You won't get one, the radios don't work either. What about satellite phones? They stop. GPS, they lie. I frowned. What does that mean? He walked over to an old wooden desk. There was an ancient handheld GPS unit sitting beside a notebook. He turned it on, the screen flickered, loaded, then displayed the same coordinates, over and over again, no matter which direction he turned it. The location never changed. We tested 17 different GPS units. They all said we were standing in different places. Some claimed we were 20 miles north. Others, he paused, claimed we were standing in the middle of the ocean. And Noah laughed nervously. This has to be some kind of joke. The ranger looked at him. Do I look like I'm joking? Silence filled the tower again. The old man walked to the broken window. The forest isn't haunted. It isn't cursed. It isn't supernatural. He looked toward the endless trees. It's simply wrong. He continued, the trees grow normally, the animals behave normally, the weather is normal, but people, they stop making sense. I looked at the incident reports. What do you mean? He pointed to one file, a father, his wife, their 10-year-old daughter. The family entered the park on a Saturday morning. Sunday afternoon, search teams found their campsite. Everything remained exactly where they'd left it. Food still cooking, sleeping bags unzipped. Shoes beside the fire, but the family, gone, no signs of a struggle. No blood, no footprints, nothing. Another report, 3 college students. Their tent was discovered 2 days later. All 3 backpacks were inside, wallets, phones, car keys, everything except the students. Another, 2 experienced hikers. Their trail cameras recorded them walking into the forest. Hours later, the cameras captured them again, walking the opposite direction, except the timestamps never changed. Both recordings were taken at exactly the same second. The footage was examined by experts. Nobody could explain it. The ranger closed the folder. After 28 years. I've stopped asking why. I only care about getting people back. I leaned forward. How? He looked at me for a long moment, then quietly asked, when the kidnappers stopped chasing you, did they say anything? I remembered the shouting, the panic, then. In the warning, they told us to come back. They begged us not to go farther. The ranger slowly nodded. They weren't trying to save themselves. They were trying to save you, before either of us could respond. A loud metallic bang echoed from somewhere below the tower. Every one of us froze. Another bang, this time louder. Someone was climbing the stairs. The rusted steps groaned beneath heavy boots. One step, then another, then another. Noah whispered, please tell me that's one of your rangers. The old man didn't answer. Instead, he quietly reached beneath the desk and pulled out an old hunting rifle. He checked the chamber, only 1 bullet. He looked at us. His voice dropped almost to a whisper. Whatever happens, don't answer if it calls your name. Then, the footsteps stopped. Right outside the tower door, the footsteps stopped. No one moved. The old ranger held the rifle against his shoulder without taking his eyes off the door. The tower was completely silent. Then, 3 slow knocks echoed through the room. Knock, knock, knock. No voice followed, no attempt to force the door open. Just 3 perfectly spaced knocks. The ranger quietly whispered, stay away from the door. Noah's breathing had become so heavy I could hear it across the room. Another 30 seconds passed. Nothing. Then, a voice, soft, calm, almost familiar. Ryan. Every hair on my body stood up. It sounded exactly like my father. The same voice, the same tone. the same way he always said my name, except my father had been hundreds of miles away. The ranger never looked at me. Don't answer. The voice came again. Ryan, we've been looking everywhere for you. Noah slowly looked at me. I heard your dad. The ranger shook his head. You didn't. The voice changed. Now it was Noah's mother. Noah, sweetheart, it's safe now. His face went completely pale. That's my mom. Number. The ranger interrupted. It's not. The knocking returned, once, then twice, then silence. Minutes passed before the ranger slowly lowered the rifle. It knows there are 3 of us. What is it? I asked. The old man looked out the window again. I've worked here for 28 years, and I still don't know. I only know what it does. It never forces anyone. It waits, it imitates, and eventually, someone always answers. The ranger led us downstairs just as the first rays of sunlight broke through the trees. The forest looked peaceful. Birds sang overhead. Nothing about it matched the terror of the night before. At the bottom of the tower, he stopped beside an old map nailed to a wooden post. Most of the park had been crossed out with red paint. Only one narrow trail remained. You stay on this trail, you do not leave it. No matter what you hear, no matter who calls your name, no matter what you think you see. We followed him without another question. For hours, we walked through the forest. Twice we heard distant voices. Both times, they sounded like people calling for help. The ranger never even turned his head. Around noon, Noah suddenly stopped walking. What? He pointed toward a clearing, parked between the trees. Was the white cargo van, the same van we'd escaped. Its rear doors were still open. The ranger immediately raised his hand. Don't, they're gone, I whispered. He looked at me. Exactly. The silence around the van was unsettling. No birds, no insects, nothing. We approached carefully. Inside, the zip ties were still scattered across the floor. The pistol lay exactly where it had fallen. One backpack belonged to one of the kidnappers. Inside were cash, passports, burner phones. Everything, nothing had been taken. Outside the van, 7 sets of footprints led toward the old warning sign. None came back. The ranger stared at them for several long seconds. They finally crossed. His voice carried no satisfaction, only sadness. By late afternoon, we reached the Forest Service Road. For the first time since our escape, a phone showed 1 bar of signal. I called 911 within 40 minutes. Police vehicles filled the road, search teams, ambulances, state investigators. We were safe, or at least that's what we believed. The investigation lasted almost a year. The fake police checkpoint was linked to a kidnapping ring that had operated across 3 states. Our descriptions helped authorities identify every member, but none of them were ever found. The white van was recovered. Their fingerprints were everywhere. Their DNA matched, their wallets, weapons, phones, even their fingerprints on the steering wheel. Everything proved they had been there, everything, except the men themselves. They had simply disappeared. Officially, the case remains open. The police concluded the kidnappers fled into the forest after abandoning the van. No evidence ever supported that theory. The detective assigned to our case admitted something to me years later. There was one piece of evidence they never released. One trail camera. Mounted almost half a mile from the warning sign, it captured all 7 kidnappers standing together, looking into the trees. None of them crossed the boundary. For nearly 4 hours, they remained perfectly still. Then, at exactly 4:17 in the morning, every one of them took a single step forward. The camera recorded another 12 seconds, and then its battery suddenly died. A brand new battery, installed less than 2 days earlier. When investigators recovered the camera later that afternoon, it still had more than 90% charge. No technician, no manufacturer, no investigator could explain why it had shut off. I returned to that forest only once, 5 years after the kidnapping. The old fire watch tower had been demolished. The campground had vanished. The warning sign was gone. The Park Service claimed none of them had ever existed. I almost believed them, until I looked at the new visitor map. A section of the forest had been permanently closed. No explanation, no reason, just a simple notice. Area closed, no public access. As I walked back to my car, I noticed something tucked beneath the windshield wiper. It was an old park ranger badge, worn, scratched, covered in rust. The name engraved on it read, Harold Bennett. When I searched for him later, I found a newspaper article. It was dated 1998. The headline read, Veteran Park Ranger Missing During Search Operation. Harold Bennett, the ranger who had led us out of the forest, had officially disappeared 28 years before we met him. That was the end of this story. If you've ever experienced something you still can't explain, or have a strange story of your own, send it to Tales of the Dark. Your story could become the next nightmare featured on this channel. If you are new here, subscribe to Tales of the Dark, where every story gives you a nightmare.